You're listening to Canary Cry Radio.
Bigfoot has been the subject of debate for years, and it's back again.
This thing was 10 foot tall. He had beautiful hair.
This video was captured on the cell phone of a Turner teen after he and his dad heard strange noises. In it, a tall, dark figure can be seen walking from right to left.
There was a 8 to 10 foot hairy man looking person.
It could be a bison, it could be a bear, and it definitely could be Bigfoot.
He looked like he had 6 fingers on each hand.
Has Bigfoot been spotted in Maine? Well, a video from the woods has gone viral on YouTube. And after 4 days of investigating, a local researcher says he can't quite debunk it.
And there was Bigfoot standing there. He was standing on his hind feet. He was very tall, and he was gray and dirty, ugly looking, with real curly-like hair.
Belief can be a powerful force. No one knows that better than the people who are sure they've seen Bigfoot.
At first I thought it was probably a deer or something, and then it looked tall, and then I thought, well, no, it must be another guy out here, but I thought I didn't think there was anybody else anywhere near where I was. It was such a remote area. It was very unusual that it could be another person, but then I realized that no, it wasn't a person, and it wasn't an animal on 4 legs, and then I clearly saw that it was furry. It was Bigfoot. I mean, that's what it was. It was Bigfoot.
And then we looked, and there was this creature, and it ran down this hill, and then it disappeared.
What Murphy thinks she saw was Sasquatch, also known as Bigfoot.
It was not a human gait. It was not a human. Never thought about Bigfoot. I've never gone out and looked for Bigfoot. It was there.
Here's Basil and Wallace.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Canary Cry Radio. My name is Basil.
And this is Gons. Welcome to episode number 88.
88.
And just want to start off by saying perhaps the largest mythical beast that supposedly roams the various mountainous areas across the world, yet remains elusive to many researchers, especially many cameras, is the enigmatic Bigfoot. But with so many eyewitness accounts and anecdotes reporting encounters with this hairy beast, it causes one to wonder whether or not they actually exist. And if so, what sorts of implications does it have to the Bible-believing Christian? So to discuss these matters, we've invited onto Canary Cry Radio Tommy Poland. Tommy is a bivocational associate pastor for a church plant in Trinity, North Carolina for the CenterPointe Community Church. He's a U.S. Army veteran from 1990 to 1993. Thank you for your services. And an IT professional for over 20 years, having worked with 3 Fortune 500 companies. And he is currently an IT project manager, which is interesting because that's what my wife does. But anyway, he is also an investigator with the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization since 2005 and has investigated over 50 local Bigfoot sightings in North and South Carolina. He's also a dad of 2 kids and married to what he claims to be the best wife ever.
Absolutely.
It's Tommy Poland. How you doing, Tommy?
Pretty good, Gons. How are you guys doing? Thanks. Are you doing well?
Doing good. That has got to be the longest intro that we have ever had.
Thank you very much. Well, he said a bio, so I was like, let me give you what I've got.
Yeah, that was good. And we got to tag in an intro for Bigfoot himself up there at the top too. So Absolutely. That's perfect. Well, how you doing? Good. How you doing today, buddy?
Doing well.
Good. Well, thanks for taking the time out to come hang out with us and talk to us about the Big Feet Man.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Tommy, can you tell us what got you interested in the subject of Bigfoot?
Yeah, sure. So many years ago, and this is probably going to date myself a little bit, when I was younger and you wanted to go enlighten yourself on something, you went to a place called the library. And I was a frequenter of the library and when I was younger, and I was always drawn to the 00 section. If you're familiar with your Dewey Decimal System, and that always took me to the paranormal and sci-fi stuff.
Huh.
And And so I was always drawn to the Bigfoot books. I looked at the UFO stuff, and that was always interesting and fascinating. And then really started looking to the Bigfoot phenomenon and read on that back when I was a younger kid. And then as the internet started making headway there in the mid-'90s, I started doing a little bit more reading and research online about it. And around the mid-2000s, did a little bit more research as the internet became more prevalent, and people started getting databases more solidified. I ran across the BFRO, Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization.
Yeah, I would say that the early internet was like, I feel like it was mainly dedicated to a lot of Bigfoot research.
It did, right? It did. I mean, a lot of it was like, wow, that's
much of
pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was. So as I started looking at the different sites, the BFRO seemed to have probably the most comprehensive of databases and seemed to be a little bit more streamlined and organized as far as people interviewing eyewitness accounts. And that's the majority of the evidences that we have for the creature are eyewitness accounts outside of, the obscure video and pictures,
right,
and vocalizations. But the vast majority of your evidences are people telling you a story. And
right.
The BFRO's got a good vetting process. So by the time it's gotten to the databases, you can pretty well take it to the bank that the individuals making the report have seen something.
Uh-huh. And this brought you further in your research, reading?
It did, yeah. As soon as I started doing all, reading from a child, reading on the internet. I grew up in Southeast Texas in 1998. My wife and I moved to North Carolina. And as I started doing the research online back in 2005, I was like, I'm going to take this from armchair research to field research. I love camping, and so a lot of these sightings were happening in my very backyard here in North Carolina, so why not get out there and just see for yourself?
Right.
And see if there's something to it. Is this something being hoaxed, or is there more to this phenomena? And so I would go out and go camping in the areas and listen in the wee hours of the night. And my first foray into this area, it's called the Uwharrie National Forest. It's a little bit south of where I'm at now. Camping out about 1 to 2 in the morning, I heard some vocalizations, howling noises. Now, I've been camping a lot of my life in Southeast Texas and in North Carolina, and I'm very familiar with coyotes and wolves and all the different wildlife and the sounds. And this one just sounded unique. It almost sounded very simian, very primate. And I said, this is very strange. And unfortunately, I had a recorder with me, but the sound woke me up. And I was so startled by the sound, I just sat there and listened. I was like, this is cool. And then it went away and I forgot to record. So it was one of those, facepalm moments. But you look back at him like, gosh, but that really, it prompted me to go further. And so I went on an expedition with the BFRO, became an investigator, and then really got to start talking face to face with people in their one-on-one accounts. And that's really where the rubber meets the road when you start talking to people and you're able to, I would say, guys, 90% of the stuff that comes through you can toss out, and it's just people, maybe they're inebriated or what have you, and they think they saw something they didn't. But then there's that 10%.
Right.
And I go into it, and I went into this whole thing as open-minded but skeptical. I want to use a scientific method, look at the evidences, and let's logically go through it. Could this be something that's happening naturally? Maybe it was a misidentification. Maybe it was a black bear. Maybe it was a horse. Maybe it was a very tall person in a ghillie suit. It could have been a number of those. It could be a number of those different things. And so when I went out and we started doing the research and having my own encounters, and you start kind of crossing things off what it could be, and you're left with a small remnant of what it could be.
Right.
And the more, and really the people's stories, the eyewitness accounts, when people look at you unblinking in the eye, and they tell you, I don't care if anybody believes me or not. I'm going to tell you what I saw, and I know I saw.
Yeah.
And they describe it in their story. And you can ask the same person their story a year later, and it stays the same.
Yeah. How many people have you interviewed or talked to about this?
In North Carolina and South Carolina, over 50.
In an investigative sort of manner.
As an event. Now, going out and people finding out what my little side hobby is, they'll tell me their stories and those are documented. So potentially, hundreds more, that people have told me.
Yeah.
And, law enforcement and military have told me things. And, they're like, I don't want this to go on record. Don't tell them my name, but I'm going to just tell you the story, what we saw.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that's the challenge with, so many people probably do see things and, have encounters and things like that are unexplained, and not just Bigfoot, but UFOs and all kinds of stuff.
Sure.
But they don't want to go on record. They don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure we have a bunch of listeners who have a Bigfoot story. Seems like whenever we talk about something like this, somebody emails or gives us a call and lets us know. What are some of the more, interesting, I guess when the normal person thinks of Bigfoot sighting, they think of, some guys, up in the woods gathering mushrooms, and then they come running back with a story.
Running back, yeah. So there's a couple that really stand out to me that I've interviewed and investigated on site. One in particular happened about 2009. It was featured on the Animal Planet show, Finding Bigfoot. I had a brief 9-second cameo on that show on Animal Planet. In the two of the cases they portrayed on that show were my cases.
Star, baby.
No, far from it. But there was a group of hikers, 3 hikers, in the back of this small national forest in central North Carolina called Uwharrie National Forest. They went and they camped in this area off one of these trails, and about midnight, 1 in the morning, and they're in their tents, something starts to pelt their tent with rocks or sticks or something. They just hear something hitting their tent. And so, of course, and it goes to what's that? It's at night, something's hitting our tent, and they get scared, and they stay, and it ramps up through the night. The sticks and the rocks start hitting the tent, and then it goes to some yelling and some howling and some screaming around their tent, and they're really scared. And this goes on till about dawn, 5:30 to 6 in the morning.
Oh my gosh!
They get out of the tent and they pack up and they leave. Now, some of the, and I would ask them the details of the rocks. He said you could hear the rocks going through the tree limbs and hitting the leaves like you could hear the trajectory, and then it would hit the tree really loud like a baseball bat, or it would land into the creek nearby and make a big splash like a cannonball.
Wow.
And it sounded like it was more than just one. It was 2 or 3. In fact, one of the guys that were one of the campers, he refuses to go back out to this area and camp anymore. And so 2 weeks later, we went back. I mean, this is a very fresh case, and I got it in the database. And 2 weeks later, I went out and investigated it. And the evening when we set up, something started getting thrown into the campsite. I'm like, it's happening. What's going on? So immediately, logically, I'm going, okay, what is something falling out of the trees? And so I'm looking around, and it's not. You could hear, and I couldn't see where they were landing, but you could hear them just flying through the leaf and hitting the ground. And it wasn't happening nearly as frequently as these guys reported, but about every hour you would hear that, and then you would hear some footfalls off the distance up on a ridge. And so, a skeptical person in the story, they're like, well, a skeptical person, they've asked me, they'll say, there were some local rednecks out in the woods and they were messing with you guys. But just to give you some context, this was in a very deep, far away portion of the Uwharrie National Forest. It would take you literally 2.5 hours to hike into it, very hilly. It was in the summer, very humid, tick-infested, rattlesnakes. I don't know of anybody that's going to want to play a prank on some local campers off the side of a trail without, all night long, without going at least for an hour and go, hey, fooled you guys. And that never happened.
Yeah.
So they packed up and headed out. And we had that experience. And I had it. And I left that evening. One of the other investigators stayed that night, and he actually had one of the rocks that was thrown, and it hit his chair.
Oh, my gosh.
Yep.
That's gnarly. Is that a normal thing for Bigfoot to start throwing stuff at people?
It is. It's part of their, and what they'll do, and here's kind of give you an outline of most sightings. They're trying to get the human out of the area. You're in their territory,
right?
Whatever, and they'll ramp up. Most of the time, it'll start with a little grunting noise, and then they'll throw a rock at you, and then they'll throw sticks, If that doesn't work, they'll actually rush your campsite and just kind of storm through your campsite, hit your pots and pans, flip some coolers. If that doesn't work, they'll actually make a physical presence. Now, this is where it gets a little unusual, and this is where I started making my ties biblically. And if you don't mind me segueing into that a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
So when I got into the phenomenon, I'll get back just to talking about how they ramp up. When I got into this phenomenon, I started doing a study. When I got into the BFRO, they started describing some of these things that are happening, and as I started interviewing people, some of these things are happening. One of the things they'll do in their ramp up method, and just work with me here a little bit, they will make their eye. They have a bioluminescence, and they can make their eyes glow red or reddish orange.
Okay.
I personally haven't witnessed that in the numerous field expeditions I've been on or on-site cases. I've never witnessed the red eye glow or the orange eye glow. But people that I would use them as my litmus test, that if they tell me, they come back and say, Tommy, I saw this, without a doubt, I believe them. And I've had a couple of investigators that I trust considerably that have told me, I'm telling you, I saw this, and they'll make their eyes grow red. So if the rock throwing doesn't work and the storming through your campsite and flipping your coolers doesn't work, they'll make a physical showing in front of you with their big, stature and their red eyes. And then if that doesn't work, and here again, work with me on this one, they do something, and I found all this out when I started doing my investigation in 2005. They'll do something called zapping. Okay, let me explain. So zapping is a phenomenon that they call it kind of sounds National Enquirer-ish when they call it zapping, but it's similar to what elephants and tigers are being studied to do in the wild, which they emit a low-frequency infrasound to stun their prey. And apparently, in some situations where you just stand your ground, they will emit this frequency. I know it's getting crazy, low frequency, to make you, give you this very flight or fight feeling to where you want to get out of Dodge.
Right.
And in some cases where people have reported doubling over and throwing up, getting very nauseous, getting sick, or even fainting and passing out.
Right.
Just to elicit an extreme fear. Their objective is to get you out. So then the questions obviously are, well, why don't they kill a human? It's a good question. Because if they kill modern human, they understand that they're in this particular state, that they kill a man or kill some people, it's going to bring other people in. And their main defense is being not seen and staying in the shadows of myth.
Right.
So when I started hearing all of this, early on in my studies, I thought, and the most common theme in the Bigfoot research field, and you'll see most people, they'll say, well, there's some sort of a line of an ancient giant ape called Gigantopithecus.
Right.
And it was a giant ape that was up in the Asian continent, migrated over the land bridge and made it over to North America. That's the common theory. I used to subscribe to that theory, but the more of the investigations that I did, the more I started to see some very unusual non-animal-like traits. Of course, we do see bioluminescence in nature. We do see infrasound. But then to combine it all together with this big, giant, hairy creature that's a humanoid, eyes glow red and zaps, it sounds very unusual. And so the more I started reading Scripture, and I started reading descriptions about the fallen ones, the Nephilim, and then I started listening to L.A. Marzulli, I started connecting dots, and I'm like, there's something more to it. And long story short, I personally believe, and this will throw a lot of Bigfoot investigators off there listening, and some of them may believe it. I believe that they're a remnant of Nephilim. That's what I believe. There it is.
Wow.
There it is. I said it.
Going on record.
There it is.
You're in a safe place,
and that's what I personally believe.
You're in a safe place.
Well, I know it.
Yeah.
And so, and a lot of people ask, well, why don't they find the bones?
Right.
To which my response is, well, have you ever heard of the Ohio mounds or some of the mounds in Minnesota? And heck, there's some here in North Carolina where they've actually excavated bones of very large people.
Yeah.
It's very possible that's what these are.
You can actually see, many times Bigfoot is portrayed with having sort of an elongated skull or like kind of a tall forehead. With like a lot of those.
Yeah, they have a sagittal crest. Yep.
Right. Wow, that's really interesting.
And as I started putting those pieces together and started looking at it, it was just intriguing me. And the more I've gone out in the field, I personally haven't seen one.
Yeah.
The closest that I've gotten was that night when I was investigating, had the rocks thrown at me. Who knows how close they were. But my very first experience was on an expedition in North Carolina near an area called Dark Mountain. Sounds ominous already.
Uh-huh.
And
Go there. Sounds scary.
Yeah, I know. About 1 or 2 in the morning, me and a couple of other investigators were out trying to lure them in. I know it sounds ludicrous when we start talking through it and saying it out loud. We're trying to lure them in. And the way you do this, I started learning all this from Matt Moneymaker, who is the president of the BFRO and is on the Animal Planet show Finding Bigfoot. And he was explaining all this through his years of research that communicate through these knocking sounds. And you guys have probably seen this on the shows.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Yep, the wood knocking. And so we were doing this wood knocking at Dark Mountain. And at about 1 or 2 in the morning, within 50 yards of our position, we were in this clearing. If you can imagine this clearing where your power lines kind of cut through. We were in this clearing facing the forest. And about that time, between 1 and 2 in the morning, there's a very loud knock, way louder than what we were doing, emanated back probably 50 yards into the forest. And it scared me. It was so loud, it scared me to death. And, I'm like, what was that? Was that one of you guys? And we actually had one of the FLIR cameras on. It was a very weird setup that Matt had at the time where it was this helmet. I kind of looked like a character out of Monty Python, but it was like this helmet and this FLIR device mounted to the top of it. And then I had this, if you're familiar with Star Trek Generations, like a Geordie-like visor that I was wearing. That was a monitor. If you would have saw me in daylight, somebody would be like, that guy, and I had a backpack with a DVR on. It was so it looked odd. And at night, I'm sure these things are going, what is that? And so I'm trying to record. Needless to say, I didn't get it on recording because I panicked.
Right.
And I grabbed the guy next to me and said, was that you? He's like, no, it was coming around in front of us. And I heard that loud sound. And I knew right away that there was something to it, because we were the only ones out there. We were out in the middle of nowhere. And so I knew right away there was something to it. And the more I dug and the more I started investigating and kind of putting 2 and 2 together, I knew there was something to the phenomenon. One thing you got to understand, and also in the Bigfoot realm, and let me get this out there, there are two camps. Okay. There are the serious, what I call the serious scientific Bigfoot investigators, where you actually have amateur scientists, which I'd like to consider myself, and then you actually have legitimate PhD scientists that are doing research. Dr.
Right.
Jeff Meldrum, Idaho State University, is probably one of the more prominent guys. He's received a lot of ridicule. He's doing it, but he's got a good database of evidences. And the genuine scientists, people that just want to go find out what is it. And then the other camp are the fringe, or what I call the sensationalist. Every time they go to the woods, they have a Bigfoot experience. Every time. Every time. And I can't stand it. And it drives me crazy because there are animals in the forest.
Yeah.
Trees fall by themselves. Rocks sometimes slip off the side of a cliff. So things naturally occur. So they abandon logic and they just immediately rush into the Bigfoot. It's a Bigfoot. It's a Bigfoot.
Right.
And so when I went into this, step by step, as I said earlier on, I wanted to go through. And so if there is something to it, the evidence will present itself. And it has. It really has over time. Now, getting back to the Nephilim theory, and what really kind of solidified it for me a little bit more was here recently, and you can probably Google it and find some more information on it. There was a Bigfoot shooting, allegedly Bigfoot shooting, up in Pacific Northwest, actually, I think Northern California area.
Right.
A guy named, and it's controversial. Anyway, a gentleman says he shot a Bigfoot. I don't know all the specific details.
And he
but
put it in his freezer?
Put it in his freezer, yep. You probably heard of the story.
I think I remember this story.
Yep, and they went off and to get some DNA samples. They went to a lady named Melba Ketchum. I believe she's in Texas, and she's done some research, and I think the papers are still being peer-reviewed or whatever, but they've got the DNA, and from a friend of mine who is a very respected investigator in the BFRO, he was telling me that when he spoke with whomever about it, that the results that came back said it was mostly human, but then there was a very big portion of unknown DNA. And she called it and this is what she called it. She called it angel DNA. Now, how she came to that conclusion of it being angel DNA, I don't know. But the hair stood up on my back of my neck.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, this really kind of makes sense. I mean, if you look at all the biblical accounts of the giants and the giants that the Jews had to face, the Israelis had to face, and the opposing kingdoms around them.
Right.
It really starts to add up. And, as it says in Genesis, it says, and they were there, before flood and then afterwards. And I think there's still a remnant left. Or the remnant from that first attempt at trying to, infiltrate the genetic line of man, and then they're just still a breeding population, maybe.
Right.
But it's definitely interesting to more, and I cannot seem to, I'll get out into the woods and camp, and then, and I'll pray, and I'm like, Father, if this is crazy, if you don't want me to see this thing, just don't let me see it. I don't, it's okay. But I kind of want to see it. And then in my
praying that a lot too.
And then my spirit, yes, but then in my spirit, it's almost like he's going, no, you don't. Or, I'll get you kind of this close.
Yeah.
But you're not. And I have yet, and I've gone out a number of times. Now I've put the investigations on hiatus since I started this church plant, but from time to time I do get out and do the investigation.
Yeah.
But the more I research it, the more it connects back biblically.
Right. Now, I've known a couple of people who actually have had Bigfoot sightings or Bigfoot experiences, and one more than the other, but they both sort of had this, I don't know, when they're explaining the situation to me, they explain it in almost like it was now I want to use this term lightly, but they seem to have sort of a spiritual experience with, not necessarily with Bigfoot itself, but like, I don't know, the fact of seeing him, and there's just like
the phenomenon.
There's just like a feeling of destiny and like just some strange outer worldly stuff. Is that something you encounter a lot?
Yeah, I do. And definitely I try to be careful of that too, because there are the group in the fringe that like to consider them some sort of interdimensional beings, and then they're tied together where UFOs are dropping them off all over the place. So I try, but yes, I do find that oftentimes when people I've had people that report to me when they've seen the thing light the eyes red, that they immediately start crying. And so I don't know if maybe that has to tie in with the infrasound, what they call zapping. Not sure. But I've had that.
So let's talk about that zapping real quick. Is that how has somebody measured that, or is that caught on recorder or something? Because I know that is that is something, like you said, with elephants and tigers, and that's a field of study going on right now. Was that just found with researchers and recorders, or
that was found through personal experience? And that's sometimes. And now recently, there's a friend of mine in the BFR over in the Missouri area, and I saw that he had this experience, his zapping experience, and they caught it on recording. Now I think they're still doing some analysis to see the different frequencies and see if it is that frequency range that you would consider infrasound. But I'm not sure where that study's at now. But as far to date, there hasn't been. Most of this is all eyewitness accounts. Now, me personally, if I were walking through a very dark forest and this 8, 9, 10 foot massive creature stood up in front of me, I may soil myself, and want to have the fight or flight feeling too, when something that intimidating. So they may, I'd like to say they may be attributing it to that, but then again, I don't want to discount some of these guys' experiences because they're adamant that what they had was what they consider as zapping, and they could feel something emanating through their bodies.
Right.
Weird stuff, man. I know it's weird stuff.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, there's people who have UFO encounters that have the same thing, that same feeling.
You're exactly right, Gon.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Now, I had a question about probably the most famous recording of the alleged Bigfoot. And this sort of could be misdirection, it could be fake. It's a 16 millimeter film that was taken in 1967 by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin and Bluff Creek, California. What are your thoughts on that footage?
I think it's real footage. I think it's genuine footage of what we call a Sasquatch. I think it's been ran through some serious recently scrutinization through current technologies, examination of the film. There was actually a group that went back and got an identical recorder that Gimlin used,
right.
the exact aperture, and they were able to do some analysis with the trees at the Bluff Creek area and come up and determine that this was probably between 6'9" to 7 foot tall figure. You can clearly see when you enhance some of the film that it's female. So it's the most scrutinized, but it's still yet to be disproved as being a hoax. There's a lot of people who have come forward and said, I'm the guy in the suit, I'm the guy in the suit. But when you have 10, 15 people saying, I'm the guy in the suit coming out,
yeah,
that immediately discredits the guy in the suit theory.
Right.
People are just trying to take some sort of a credit. I think it's genuine. I think it's legitimate. I got a friend of mine. He's an investigator over in California. His name is, he's on the Animal Planet show, Finding Bigfoot. His name is Bobo. They call him Bobo. And he's been out in that region before. He's told me before that he's pretty confident that's the real deal. And I believe him wholeheartedly. He's a good guy.
Now, there's a lot of Bigfoot footage out there.
There is.
I mean, where do you categorize most of this? Is this something do you spend time going through videos, or is that not really your way of doing things? But
no, from time to time, somebody will send me something. What do you think about this video? And I keep track through the Bigfoot's BFR database and through the BFRO's Facebook sites and stuff like that. And majority of it, Basil, you can probably toss as somebody just trying to make a hoax. But there's some intriguing stuff out there. Right. And that's always the trick. People are like, why can't we get 21st century? Why can't we get one of these things on camera? We've got cameras all over the place. So here's some things to kind of keep in mind. Number one, these things are primarily nocturnal. I don't know about you, but at night I'm asleep for the most part, unless I'm out camping. Most of the human population is going to be asleep. Save a few people here and there are going to be out in the night, and they're nocturnal. Number two, they're fast. These are quick animals. They've got long strides. So if you have a game camera set out there, even some of the quickest triggered cameras have a hard time catching deer. And somebody said, well, no, I've seen a game cam where a deer sprinted by and we've caught the back end of a deer. Sure. So let's say that happens with a Bigfoot. Let's say a Bigfoot sprints by a game cam, bam, gets a shot, and you see a hairy backside go by.
Right.
Is it a bear? Is it a bear?
Yeah.
Or is it a Bigfoot? What part of that are you going to see and say, aha, conclusively, this is a Sasquatch? No. Or if you see an arm or a hand go by, it's still not, and these things they're going to flip by, and they can also detect and hear some of these sounds. And I know that because we had a gentleman, it's one of the investigators out here, he had a couple of high-end a few years ago, back when these were high-end Reconyx game cams. It was the top-of-the-line game cams we had, and we put them out in this area where we've had some sightings. And he camouflaged them in a stump and in some brush to where a person walking by just wouldn't see them. And we left them out there for months. He collected it. We got the SIM card back from one disappeared. It got swiped. We're not sure where that one went, but we found the other one. Reviewed the SIM cam or the SIM card, and went through all the photos. And it was actually kind of funny. It was all it was the wildlife during the day, and at night the raccoons and the deer. What was intriguing, even though it was well camouflaged, the raccoons could sense it, and so could the deer. And they come up and they'd nuzzle and nose and push the brush away, and they would paw at it, and so they could hear this frequency, and I suspect that these things can hear it as well.
Yeah, that's kind of my sort of theory, I guess, without really having, being informed of all the inner workings of the Bigfoot phenomenon. But I guess it would make sense, especially if they're emitting low frequency sort of, waves or whatever, they're probably operating at a different sort of range of frequency that's not, detectable by humans.
Right.
So that would make sense. But, I guess, when I had a question about how big these things are and if they're moving around so quickly, wouldn't they shake the ground when they run around? And I'm just confused about how they're so elusive if they're so big.
Yeah, that's a good question. And it really depends on and the more of the research that I've done, and some of the investigators would agree with this, depending on the geography, where they are on the map. In the southeast, where I'm at, and down in Florida, they're a little bit smaller. They average between 6 to 7 foot tall. And some of them, we've had reports of them to 8 foot tall. They're not as the further south you get to where swamps of Louisiana and Florida and South Carolina, they're a little thinner in stature, and so they're not as heavy. They're big still. You get up here in the mountains of North Carolina, some reports are 7, 8, 9 feet tall, a little bit heavier, a bit more muscular. some of the descriptions we've been given, they look like a bodybuilder or a big football player. Big
wow.
chest, massive. You get up in the Pacific Northwest, you get up in Northern California area, in Oregon and Washington State, Alaska, and Canada, where the terrain is more rugged. They're bigger. There have been some reports of them being in excess of 9, 10, 11 feet tall, and they're massive, big bodies. Well, if you were to kind of do some reverse engineering on biology and take a look at it, it would only stand to reason that they would need to have some sort of bigger physique to navigate across tougher terrain. Right. A lot of these sightings, people see them going up the mountainside. They see them going right up the side of a steep mountain like you and I walk across straight ground. And so their biology allows them to kind of navigate on some pretty tough terrain. But even in North Carolina, some of the sightings we have, people, they've heard them come to the campsite, they've thumped the ground. But they're also very, if I can use this term, ninja-like on their feet. Right. Probably some of the best footage was taken by an investigator, a friend of mine named Mike Green out in this area. Thermal footage, some of the best footage, and I know Mike very well. And you can take, he's one of my litmus test guys. If he says he saw something, heard something, and then you can take it to the bank. And he's been doing this for many, many years. And he got some very good thermal footage of one in the Uwharrie National Forest down where we're here, where we're doing our investigations. And basically, he was baiting a stump with Zagnut candy bars. And he had been doing that over years with other things, or over the months and years, to try to, when it's confidence, to lure it out, to try to get it on camera. And he was able to successfully one night. But what he found out, his surprise, is way in the distance, it was kind of covering itself behind trees, and then it kind of crouched down, disappeared, and then it popped up by the stump. And it literally was low crawling. It was crawling on its hands and its feet. So they're very cautious of humans.
That freaks me out more than anything.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The more I do the study, the more I start reading about it and hearing about it and seeing the evidences, the more it's they're highly intelligent. This is also why I don't think it's this ancient ape. This is also why I don't think it's any kind of of a missing link. They're evading 21st century humanity.
Well, that kind of brings me to another thing. Going back to the Nephilim theory that you have. Yeah. We could all see where kind of biologically the shape of the skull and the description and everything is very similar and could be compared to a Nephilim. But what the heck are they doing? Or are they just, I mean, you mentioned that they always try to, scare humans away or something. Are they just out protecting the forest, or?
I think they are trying to.
What could be a Nephilim agenda out there? Yeah,
right. I think the Nephilim agenda right now is just trying to survive. I think they know that they're I think they're damned. I think they know it. Right. I don't think they're obviously they're not redeemable. Because they're this hybrid, and I think that ultimately they're just trying to survive from modern human. More and more as our technology increases, their hiding spots are getting less and less, and so they're right now. I think they're just trying to survive. I don't think they have a specific agenda.
Yeah.
Now I could be wrong though. I mean, maybe they're part of that last days army. Who knows? But
that's a really level-headed way to look at it. And I like that because a lot of times we think, Nephilim, the general theory is that they're evil and they're only, and I'm not saying they're not, I'm just saying their whole purpose for being on Earth is to destroy humanity. And we kind of think of them as living in some underground lair 24/7 planning on how to, destroy the world or do whatever. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense if they're literally just this tiny genetic remnant and they're a physical material being.
Yep.
That they just need to be able to live before they can carry out any evil plans.
Yeah, I think that's what they're doing. And I think they have the ability to reproduce. The populations are very small, which also kind of explains the low number of sightings that people do have.
Right.
It's been theorized by a couple of wildlife biologists that are doing this research seriously that, and numbers get tossed around on there, so somebody's going to disagree with me, but I have heard by some of these guys that the population across North America is between 8,000 and 10,000 in total. of these particular things,
Right.
whatever you want to call them, creatures. And people are like, well, that's a lot. Well, we're not really. There's, I think, a total bear population in North America is like 400,000 to 500,000.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've been out in the woods a lot, and I've never seen a black bear, even though I know they're there. But the you know, me getting out there to see one when I'm out camping and stuff, I don't see them that often.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of now take an animal that's, you know, a low population between 8 and 10,000 and spread them across North America, and they're nocturnal.
Yeah.
And they're smart.
Yeah.
You know, the people who see these things, man, the sightings are between 1 and 2 seconds. People are like, why don't they get them on their cell phone? Well, here's your typical sighting. You're driving down a dark, dreary road, and you're going down to a 2-lane road, and you got your phone beside you, and 1, 2 seconds, it just ran across the road. Where's your phone?
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, hey, stop, take a picture. I mean, these things, these sightings are between 2 and 3 seconds long, and so nobody has the time to grab the camera.
Right.
Yeah.
What about, you know, where do they live? Where are they theorized to live? And also, what do they eat? You know, because if they're that big, you know, we have the stories of, what was the blanking on the name of the giant that's in the Bible that
Goliath?
No, not Goliath. Before Goliath,
King Og?
Og, yes, King Og.
Yeah.
And Doug Hamp did some work on, you know, how much food he would have to eat to maintain his physique and stuff.
Yeah.
Where are they getting their food, and then where do they dwell?
Yep, good question. So, and down here in this part of North Carolina, I can speak to this really well. We have a huge, give you a big science term, ungulate population, deer, horned critters, lots of deer, lots of raccoon, and lots of farming in this area, lots of corn, soybean. And so a small population. I theorize that in our little area where we do our research, we probably have maybe 3 or 4 little clans, maybe 20 of them. And there's hundreds and hundreds of deer, plenty of fish, lots of corn, lots of naturally growing fruits and nuts that are in our forests. And so they're foraging in those a lot. There are a lot of rocky outcroppings, low, worn down mountainous ranges in this area. I don't think they stay in one spot. They don't have like a village. They're nomadic, and they move around. I think, especially here in the studies I've shown in my little research area, I think during you can actually I graphed it on a calendar. The hot seasons here when they're out and the sightings happen are between March through June, and between June and August they disappear. I have a theory that they navigate down the river basins towards our coast. To where water's a little more plentiful and the food life's a little more plentiful, and so they'll navigate in those areas. But they're going to remain disclosed, and most of the time they're going to be off the beaten path. They're going to be, you know, way away from where we travel. You know, people are like, well, I'm in the forest all the time. Yeah, you're on human trails. Yeah. You're on the safe area. You're not grabbing a GPS and just blazing your way through the forest. You know, otherwise you're going to be a National Geographic story or a story of
people don't understand really how big the wilderness is out there once you get out there.
Absolutely. And you get out, your guys' neck of the woods, you get out like in the Bluff Creek, California, Sierra Nevadas and stuff. Goodness gracious, man.
Yeah.
You know, I've gotten turned around in just our small forest out here. Now, fortunately, around here, if you kind of keep going straight, eventually you'll hit a road. You know, it'll take you a day or so, but
the world's overpopulating, so I don't know what you're talking about. We're getting so crowded on this planet here that
that's right.
We're supposed to, but anyway.
But I think that got to answer your question again, Gonza. There's a lot of away from the area places where humans are is where they're going to hang out. But there's some reports in some areas where they're very opportunistic and they scavenge, and they've been caught rummaging through dumpsters in rural cities.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some sort of underground cavernous system that, you know, they sort of network around the world, or at least, you know.
Yeah, it would surprise me if you ever do some research on the Mammoth Caves in Kentucky, and they're still exploring and finding new areas, and they'll pop up in another state. They're like, "Well, check this out. We're now in Ohio."
Wow.
You know, wouldn't surprise me at all if some of these natural caverns and stuff are being used for them to traverse or navigate. But for the most part, the theory is they use the waterways. And some of the terms that they'll use in the Bigfoot community is they're known as the North American river ape. They'll call them that. They're always coming out of tributaries, creeks, and rivers.
That's interesting. Yep. Have you ever tried to imagine a perfectly shaved Bigfoot?
Never have. I don't know what they would use. Flint rock.
I've had that vision stuck in my head for about 5 minutes, and I just needed to get it out there. I don't know.
What are you doing, man?
I was just trying to think how. Well, I'm already terrified of them now, and I'm like, what would make them scarier?
Well, look,
Probably if
rest
you shaved
assured.
them.
Rest assured. Now, there's some of these stories out there, but rest assured, 98.5% of all the sightings, they're just as scared of you as you are of them, and they get out of Dodge. Now, there are those few stories. Look at all the the native peoples in America and across the world,
right?
And some of the Native American legends are pretty frightening. There was actually a story of what's called, look up the Bigfoot Wars, and there were actually some wars between Native Americans and the Sasquatch. And I think they came to this mutual agreement that they would, this force, this is your side of the force, and this is our side of the force. But they would actually come in and I think even LA hits on it a little bit when he's talking about the giant peoples around the world. And I'm not sure. Have you guys talked to him before, L.A. Marzella?
Yeah, he's a friend of the show.
Okay. Has he ever talked about the Sasquatch connection at all?
I've heard him. I don't know if he talked about it on the show. I've heard him talk about it, though.
It would be interesting to see him bring that kind of full circle. I know he's looking at the stuff down in South America,
right?
And the elongated skulls and stuff, and I think he's definitely onto something. But even more, I think, not that, again, trying to see one of these things live is almost nearly impossible unless you're in the sensationalist camp. But if you're truly out there trying to it's going to be very, very difficult to actually. Now, if I can take people out in investigations, we can hear things in the distance, but very rarely do they get that close.
So how has the reception been? You mentioned your associate pastor at a church plant. You're obviously a Christian guy.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming your wife is Christian.
Absolutely.
Have you shared this sort of thing? Do your church people know about this? How is that received?
They're very familiar with my unusual hobby, and it's and they a couple of them roll their eyes. They're good friends of mine, but for the most part, we'll have our discipleship studies, and in our discipleship studies, our lead pastor, my very good friend Mike Owen, we talk about this. I'm like, this is, and you guys hit on this a lot in your discussions, and Gonz hits on it a whole bunch, and I know Doug Hemp does as well. A lot of this type of topic is taboo, and people don't talk about these kinds of things because it's, quote, the paranormal. It's relegated to the tabloids. But I take in my discipleship studies because these are the questions that are facing culture and millennials today, and they want to know. Now, tell me what's up with Bigfoot? What about aliens? What about ghosts? It's pop culture, man. All this paranormal stuff is in our face.
Yeah.
And so the church is like, I don't know. I'm not going to be that guy. I'm going to use the brain that God gave me. I'm going to look in His Word. I'm going to stay founded on that. And then I'm going to look at the evidence that's out there, and I'm going to put two and two together and line it out. And I think that's what you guys have done intelligently. I think that's what L.A. Marzulli has done intelligently. I think that's what Hemp's done intelligently through the Age of Deceit. I'm your biggest evangelist out here. Watch this show. Watch Age of Deceit. This guy, all the stuff that you're hitting on is stuff that I was told and started doing my own independent studies pre-internet. And then you guys started doing it. And Gonz, honestly, for you guys, to you be able to be revealed to this as a young Christian and see this is remarkable. This is stuff that God revealed to me over the years of being a Christian for almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And I think that there's a gift that some people are endowed with by God to see some of these evidences, but we also can't just hold it to ourselves. We have to tell folks,
right?
Look at this. And so and with Bigfoot, that's what I do in the discipleship studies, is explain to these guys what this is. Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. So yes, they do know. And we're a smaller church, and we're growing. We were only about a year and a half old. Yeah. But we've got 50 to 60 folks.
The Bigfoot Church in North Carolina.
Yeah. Well, and it was it's the quirkiest thing.
Sanctuary.
I'm new into ministry. I felt I was called in ministry when I was 40, about 5 years ago, and I started going. I'm attending Liberty University to get my degree, and I'm an associate pastor, and we're evangelizing. We're getting gospel into our community, and it was one of the quirkiest things when I was in the midst of doing this, and I was at the peak of this investigation work, and God was like, you've had your run. I know this is kind of fun. Kind of need you back in the game with the harvesting stuff, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'll still let you, dabble in it and do your research, but and I'm like, how can I use this?
Yeah.
And it's been remarkable how it's actually a segue opportunity to getting gospel out. And
yeah,
so
I would think so.
And here's my, I'm a big barbecue fan, and I'll just throw this out. There's the 3 B's. It's Bigfoot, barbecue, and Bible. Those are my 3 B's. That's what I do well. So, and Bigfoot's just one of the bigger ones.
That's funny.
The 3 B's out here, the Better Business Bureau, always emailing us and down our throats. But I had a question about just your opinion and thoughts on historically. You know, you got the Smithsonian, you got the greater scientific community. Has there been, do you think, an organized cover-up? Do you think that there are people who know that they exist and just sort of let it be? Or what are your opinions there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've talked to a few investigators that have been doing this a lot longer than I have, and they've told me of stories of, and these are good folks, saying, you know, they're not crazy or paranoid. And they're like, man, you know, sometimes you know, I feel like maybe the phone's tapped, or there have been some interesting people who have come up as I've done investigations, start asking me questions, and they look like maybe a government official. I don't know. I don't know why they would want to cover it up. You know, if you look at the big picture, like you've spelled out in Age of Deceit, and you look at the whole thing, and I pull back and I look, and I'm like, you know, what would it be other than, you know, not trying to get the truth out of them being a Nephilim? And I don't know if the general population would even accept it anyway. So I'm not so sure about a cover-up. I don't know, you know, what sort of purpose it would serve if that truth did come out, or if it didn't come out. You know, I don't know. You know, the cover-up thing's kind of tough. I don't see personally any evidences of it, as I've been doing the investigation since 2005. You know, 10 years. You know, no Men in Black have come up to me and go, "Hey, you need to tone down the Bigfoot Nephilim rhetoric a little bit."
Right.
Yeah, I've not had that.
I'm not sure,
interesting. That's interesting as well, because, you know, it seems like if they show that Bigfoot exists, then, you know, there's some paradigm in the scientific community in terms of evolution that would have to be revisited. And,
sure.
And, you know, and I'm sure they've already theorized on how it could fit into, you know, sort of a branch race that, you know, sort of went off in a different direction from the evolutionary tree or whatever. But I think it's interesting that there's seemingly, I mean, when you start talking about it, we've talked for the last, you know, close to an hour here, and I'm completely convinced that they're out there. There's no doubt in my mind that they're out there.
No, they are. I will tell you, and it takes a lot for me to believe in something, and just based off the small evidences that I've seen. You mind if I tell you one more story?
Go.
You got a minute? Okay. So this is one of the more seal the deal type stories that really helped me in firming up that this is a genuine phenomenon. This happened back 2009 when the Animal Planet program was out here filming and finding Bigfoot. So as soon as all of that media circus started coming down, and this is a very small town in North Carolina, they had a town hall meeting to where basically anybody who's had some sort of Bigfoot sighting comes out. If you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. The town hall people get together and they say, raise your hand if you have a Bigfoot story. They raise their hand, they tell their stories. Well, in the midst of the storytelling, there was one guy out, and it was in the fire department. He was kind of to himself in the back. He had his orange hunter's hat on, and he was one of the local. And you understand, in this small town, North Carolina, most of these people are very to themselves. They are not very forthcoming at anything, even one-on-one. And so you have to build up trust for folks like this, because they just don't care to tell these stories. And so this one guy, he got the courage to speak, and he spoke up, and he's a hunter. He said, I don't know about all this Bigfoot stuff, but I can tell you my story. And basically, just to give you a quick summary of it, he was out hunting out here in the Uwharrie National Forest. He shot a deer, a spike buck, just two little horns coming out, shot the deer, and he killed it. Gets out of his deer stand, and he decides to walk back to his truck and get something. You know, figured he'd kill the deer, he'd come back to get the deer. He's not in a hurry. Goes to his truck, comes back, goes to where the deer was shot, deer's gone. Well, that's not unusual. That happens sometimes when you kill a deer. Sometimes they're not completely dead, and they kind of drag themselves off. So he goes with that theory. He's walking around, sees the trail of the blood, sees the limbs being dragged to the ground, and then all of a sudden the trail stops. It's just gone. He's like, well, this is odd. So he starts kind of just searching the area, the perimeter. And out in the distance, he's looking towards this creek, and he sees a very hairy object, thinks it's a wolf or something. He pulls up his rifle, looks at it through his scope, and sees it's like this humanoid hairy thing. He said it stood up, let out this big scream, and then it was over my deer. And he said he let out this big scream, and then immediately started grabbing sticks, leaves, brush quickly, and just started burying the deer with all this debris, and buried it, and let out a scream and ran up this creek. And he got out of there, and he left, and to get his deer. And so I thought that was a pretty good story. So file that away. So a very good friend of mine owns a store out in El Dorado, North Carolina. It's a little small town, and it's kind of the hub for the recreation that's done in the national forest. And he said, Tommy, let's call up this gentleman. He was one of the guys that originally created the 22-mile Uwharrie Trail in the Uwharrie National Forest back in the 60s. He was if anybody saw anything, it would have been back in the 60s when people were hardly walking around these forests. Maybe he saw something while they were out making this hiking trail. So he calls. We go back to his office, and he's an elderly gentleman, and he's been at home with his wife, who is at home and they can't leave. Basically, they've been housebound, and so he wasn't under. He heard about the circus was going to Animal Land and everything. So anyway, we call him up, and Chris is like, "How you doing?" And he's, "Oh, doing good." He goes, "What do you think about this Bigfoot stuff?" He said, "Oh yeah, it's kind of crazy." He said, "Well, let me ask you something." He goes, "In your years back when you guys made the trail in the Uwharrie National Forest, did you ever encounter anything like a Bigfoot? Did you see a Bigfoot or see anything strange?" He said, "No, never saw a Bigfoot." He goes, "There was a section in the northern part of the trail where, while we were blazing the trail, it felt like somebody was watching us. It just felt," he said, "spooky and creepy were kind of the terms that he used." And so he said, "We actually turned the trail and kind of made the trail kind of curve around that area so that the trail didn't go through that area." And we said, "Oh, okay, that's kind of interesting." He said, "Yeah, and the only other thing that we saw that we always thought was odd," he goes, "as we would be making the trails through the forest, every once in a while, we'd come across this big pile of limbs and leaves, and there would be deer buried underneath them."
What?
This man was not at that town hall meeting. This man had been in his home. He had gotten out. He wasn't there. He had never heard that story. So
right.
You have corroborating stories here. You had a man that in the 60s, the originator of this trail, that would find these piles of leaves, piles of stick with deer shoved underneath them. Now, fast forward in the future, 2010, I've got a hunter who actually witnessed one of these animals bury a deer under leaves and sticks and limbs and trees. I got goosebumps, and I was like, that's evidence right there. Even though it's not physical
crazy.
Pictures, that matches up. And when you get stories like that, that makes me go, okay, there's something to this. There's something to it.
What do you think the Bigfoot was doing burying? Because to me, it sounds like he was somehow upset or, tortured by this idea of dead animals.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he was tortured by the idea. I think they're opportunistic hunters sometimes, and he saw the kill. He's like, "Oh, cool! Look, somebody went and did the dirty work for me. Got the deer. He was probably over there getting ready to eat it. The hunter stumbled upon him. He gets mad, tries to camouflage it, hoping the hunter won't see it.
Yeah,
takes off."
Yeah, it does seem like there's a couple ways to look at that. I was thinking like he was saving it to eat later or something.
And saving it to eat later too.
But yeah, Gons, when you mentioned that is interesting. And that does bring up another point, which is the New Age and sort of the nature-y sort of spiritualities almost deify Bigfoot in some cases. This is not a general statement, but I have seen this before. Have you encountered any of these people that that believe Bigfoot is the guardian of Mother Nature's forests and things like that? And,
we'll get that from time to time.
Right.
Out here in the East, they just consider it, or I say in the Southeast, is more of a boogeyman type creature.
Right.
On occasion, I've ran into folks that come down and think that they call them, protector of the forest or what have you. But it's not surprising. I mean, history's replete with it. I mean, you think about all the kings like King Og, and they were probably elevated to some sort of a worship type status. One thing that comes to mind is, never made the connection, but the movie 300. I think the king was that Artaxerxes. He's portrayed as big, tall, and they called him the God King. I think there was a lot of that going around.
There's your shaved Bigfoot, Basil.
There he is.
That's it. That's the shaved Bigfoot. There you go. Well connected.
Adorned with jewels.
Adorned with jewels. Yeah.
Let us reason together.
So I think that happen. I think that's definitely an idea people have.
Yeah.
God.
Now, is there a connection with the Yeti? You know, we often hear about the Yeti in the colder
I think so.
regions.
I think it's just it's again a different a breed of the. I'm going to say I'll call them a Nephilim. You know, their genetic code is designed to adapt to certain environments. I mean, our bodies do the same thing. Any species, you know, that's created has the DNA code. So it basically, if it goes into a climate where it's colder, it's going to make thicker fur. You also see that in Bigfoot sightings here in North America. If you go down, say the Skunk Ape in Florida, their hair is sparser, not shaven, but you know it's it's less, and you see more of the face and the skin. The further north you get, the more the fur or the hair that they have.
Right.
So I believe in a Yeti. Yeah, absolutely.
That's
and Australia has the Yowie, and there's all kinds of.
That was going to be my question next. How many different big-footed creatures are there?
Multiple different accounts in different cultures.
Yeah, just really as many
number.
As many different locations there are.
Everywhere, but I think Hawaii's like the only little area that doesn't. I'm not sure there's some other like remote islands. Only Easter Island has any, but
right.
Yeah, that would be very odd.
They can't swim.
Yeah, so but they're pretty much on every continent for most of the world.
Right. Wow, that's interesting.
It is.
Well, do you have a website or anything like that you kind of let people know what your work is, or?
I don't. It's again a lot of this is fledgling in my ministry.
Yeah.
One of those things as a church planter and getting gospel out in the community. Goodness, how do I use this for evangelism? And it's been used in just general conversation while I'm out and about and we talk about it. And when I give talks on occasion, and allows me to discuss my.
Yeah, you mentioned before the show you talked to a lot of Boy Scouts and things like that. Yeah. Yep. Do you find that's a fruitful endeavor?
Yes, and most of the time I think the expectation is that I come in and give them a really good, creepy bedtime story. But then when I start going through the forensics of the investigations, and talking about the eyewitness accounts, then now they're tend to be looking more over the shoulder now, wondering, should I even go camping?
Like, wait, is this guy serious?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, it's just one of those weird, bizarre topics. And you tell people, and I always just try to qualify. So, guys, let me tell you about my hobby. It always comes up, and you say it. But you know, if you're open-minded enough, and you just kind of look at things. Of course, you know we have to have discernment, especially as believers. You can't. I mean, we could go way off on rabbit trails.
Yeah.
But you've got to guard it in. But there's something to it. And really, when you start doing the research and the study, I think there's more and more connection. I know people that are Bigfoot believers that hear this and think I'm crazy, but I think there's more of a Nephilim connection here than most people realize.
Absolutely.
Especially when you married up with LA studies, you put those together, it connects the dots.
Yeah.
Very well.
No, totally. And I'm glad you make that connection with him.
Yep. Absolutely.
That gives me something else to talk about with him next time.
Please do. Yes.
Yeah. Now, there is the famous Bigfoot howl. And I may consider myself to be a practitioner of the Bigfoot howl. I may or may not bust it out in public situations, depending on who I'm with and how many people I'm trying to scare away.
Are you a big guy, Basil, or you're a tall guy? You got a big barrel chest?
I am a tall guy. I'm a big guy. So I'm going to try to do it here. We'll see if the internet can carry it. And then I want you to grade me and be honest.
Sure.
If I need to work on it, I'm going to work on it.
Go ahead, buddy.
All right. So I'm going to take off this headset and put it over here so I don't blow out the thing. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good whoop. And and there's different variations, and some people will debate me on this, but for the most part, the folks that I talk to and speak with don't get offended, Basil, but that's more the female call. the males have more of a bigger, deeper, guttural howl. It sounds like an old fire engine, and it actually revs up. And I've heard this before, and you can hear it in the distance. And it gives this. If you don't mind, can I give you my version of the male Sasquatch? Since we're measuring vocals, so it would go like this. It would go.
And so it's like a air raid siren.
That's it, and that's what it's been likened to, the air raid siren, and it's a male. Now, and I've heard this in the upstate of South Carolina. In the distance, you'll hear it, and then further off, you'll hear a response, and then sometimes you'll hear the whoop, whoop, like you did. It's very primate sounding. It really, really is. So, which is why most people think it's some sort of an ancient type of an ape, but who knows? And they also do the knocking sounds. I've heard that communication done as well.
Right. Yeah, I've heard.
Yep.
Well, that's
right. Gons, go ahead. Let me hear yours, Gons.
Let's hear your Bigfoot.
No, that's not going to happen.
Do the knocking.
I'll do the knocking. I'll put the visor beam camera on my face, but I won't do the calling. Okay. It's probably not going to do much. Yeah. I do have a question about the footprints, though, that people have found. And what are some of the more compelling footprints that have been discovered?
Yeah, Pacific Northwest has some of the best. And Jeff Meldrum probably has a great collection of these. What's intriguing about the footprints, though, people are like, you can fake a footprint. What's intriguing is a lot of the ones that were taken from the 60s and 70s, they were casted, especially some from the Bluff Creek area. When you flip the cast over, they actually can see dermal ridges, the loops and the whorls, in the actual print of the foot. I don't think anybody back then, now, today somebody could say, well, don't forget to put the loops and the whorls if you're going to fake it. But back then, in the 60s and the 70s, I don't think people were really thinking to put in the dermal ridges of the prints. So the fact to have the dermal ridges, and there's been a guy out of Texas who is law enforcement, Jimmy Chilcutt, I believe is his name, and he is a forensic fingerprint expert. He actually gives courtroom testimony for criminal investigations on fingerprints. And he actually looked at some of these cast prints, and he's like, these don't match any human prints, but they are, in fact, actual animal dermal ridges. And they run way different than humans do. They're more vertical as to loops and whorls are horizontal. So, yeah. As far as me, now, my son and I cast one out of the UR National Forest back in 2007 and it was a smaller print, probably of a juvenile Sasquatch. It was 13 inches in length, but it was wide. At the heel, it was about 5 inches wide, and the breadth of the toes, it was probably about an 8 to 9 inch breadth of the toes. So it was a big, wide, fat footprint.
Wow.
And we cast that back.
And has there ever been a case where they found maybe handprints, and then also the second question, I guess, to that is the 6 finger, 6 toes thing. Has there ever been?
Yeah. That's a good question. Yeah. Well, and that's definitely one of the connections I was learning about with the giants. And there have been some prints that have been taken across the continent where they have had 6 toes. And there was one of a knuckle print where it looked like it may have had a 6th digit. But for the most part, they have been 5-toed and 5-fingered.
That's interesting.
That is very interesting.
Now, are you partaking in this $10 million Bigfoot bounty thing? Are you going to share it with us when you find it?
No, not doing the bounty. I'm, like I said, it's a lot of the serious investigations been put on hiatus. So it's now, from time to time, I still interview people and talk to down in this research area and get out in the field from occasion, but not doing it. Well, it'll never be caught.
Well, I was going to say, what are the the parameters, or what are the requirements to win the $10 million, so to speak?
Yeah, I think you have to yield a body. I think.
Really?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's or either really good, very good footage. But footage can be so faked today. I mean, it's hard to say what's really good footage unless you're sticking the camera in the mouth of a Bigfoot. But even that can be faked.
It's true. And do you think they'll ever come out with the official, story, or do you think a body will ever be caught?
I think it's just a matter of time.
Okay.
Before it's revealed. If I were to give a prognostication, I would say within the next 5 to 10 years, it's going to be one of those things that comes out and they're like, oh, okay, they're real. Now, at that point, what are they going to do with how's it going to get spun?
Right.
And as we're getting these into this last days era, to me, it would even further the removal of people from church or believing if for some reason they try to make some kind of missing link connection with it.
Right.
Right. Well, I mean, that's kind of the same. That's the same timeline they're giving of the declassification of UFOs and things like that.
Yep.
So it could all be connected.
Come together.
Yeah.
Yep, it could.
And I guess your ministry would definitely be valuable in terms of, that if and when that comes out, that's
sure.
You'll probably be at the top of the list in terms of churchgoers looking for answers.
Yeah.
So
looking for answers, probably so. Good point.
There you go.
Yep.
All right. Well,
all right, guys.
I was going to say, if there's a way that you want people to get a hold of you, we can give that. Do you have a specific Bigfoot email that you use?
I don't, but if they want to contact me through Facebook, I have no problem with people looking me up on Facebook.
Okay.
And, Tommy, first name Tommy, last name Poland, just like the country.
There you go.
If they want to send me a PM and ask me some questions, feel free to do it.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I just would be so surprised if somebody out there, if not one of our listeners, had a Bigfoot story. So I just want to give them a place to go if they need that.
Absolutely. Feel free to contact me.
Tommy Poland, thanks so much for coming on the show, buddy. This was great.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate your work too, and your ministry, and keep it up. And look forward to Age of Deceit 3.
Amen, brother. All right, buddy. Well, we'll keep in touch, and
all right, see you guys.
Take it easy.
Yeah, see you.
So there you have it, folks. That was Tommy Poland, Bigfoot hunter.
Yep.
That was fun. I'm really glad we got him on here. It's a little bit shorter of an episode, but that's kind of refreshing after 3-hour episodes. So hope you guys enjoyed that. If you've got any comments or questions about Bigfoot, you can hit up Tommy Poland on Facebook. Also, just hit us up on Facebook, Canary Cry Radio. Now, it's that time again, everybody. Time for everybody to go to iTunes, leave a rating and a review, because you love us so much that you would do that. Well, even if you don't, going on to iTunes and leaving a rating and review helps out the show so much. A, because you can tell people how much you enjoy the show, or B, if you don't enjoy the show, you can tell them that too. And it just keeps everybody on track, listening to the good stuff.
And we got some good ones recently. We got Damian Chico with wow and 100 exclamation points.
Yeah.
These guys are great. I love the synergy they bring to the body of Christ. Then we got Melissa saying, great podcast, heavy info delivered in a way that keeps your spirit light. So much respect for these guys and what they do. Thanks, Melissa. And Bats says, I love everything about this podcast, from topics to the insight to the music production and design of it.
Yeah.
We really appreciate all the great reviews. I mean, we've had so many good reviews. It's amazing.
It's true. We've also had some poor ones. Unfortunately, most of the people who have mean things to say just tell us right to our face via email or
a voicemail.
We've got, some more people trying to make their way through the Josh Peck episode and still disgusted.
Well, it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but this is a fact.
It's hilarious.
This is a fact. We have, out of the 230 something ratings and reviews, we only have, 8 of them that were not 5-star, which is pretty impressive.
Well, don't tempt anybody.
Well, we want honest reviews. We don't want.
That's true.
iTunes probably thinks we're a bunch of shills, paying people to leave positive reviews, but
we are. So if you want to go to iTunes, leave a positive review, take a screenshot, send it into canarycryradio@gmail.com, and we'll send you $5.
Oh gosh. 5
Iraqi dinars.
But I really enjoyed this episode. I'm not a big Bigfoot guy. I've never really looked into that topic. Yeah. I've only seen stuff on TV and stuff like that. So I found it just fascinating.
It was fascinating.
And next time you go camping, you should be afraid of Xerxes.
I know. I'm glad that we did this episode after I came back from camping.
Well, this time.
I'm saying
next time.
Next time. A shaved Bigfoot is literally the scariest thing I can think of.
That's good.
Crawling
behind the trees,
crawling on all fours,
throwing rocks at your tent.
That's so not chill with me. I do not care for that. All right, so there's that. Hey, everybody, if you want to support Canary Cry Radio in a financial way, you're totally allowed to do that. That's totally cool. You can go to canarycryradio.com, click on the support tab. There you can make a donation. There are all sorts of monthly subscription type donation things, which is great because you just set it up for 5, 10, 15, 20. I don't know. There's all sorts of possibilities, but you just set it up and you forget about it. And, you know, you just support us on a monthly basis, and we get to keep the lights on. We get to keep streaming over this beautiful internet machine. It's a great thing. Or, you know, if commitment's not your thing, you can also make a donation in any amount you want. What else? Like us on Facebook.
Yep, Facebook, Twitter.
We got that Facebook
email list.
Oh, the email list. Yes. So if you go to Canary Cry Radio, you can also join our email list, and we sent out the second half or the first half, depending how you look at it, of the Josh Peck episode. And that was hilarious. It brightened people's day. It disgusted some people.
You know, I want to point out also that we just passed our 3-year anniversary, and we didn't really point it out or anything. Yeah. But March 16th was the first published March 16th, 2012 was the first published Canary Cry Radio episode. So we've been around for a long time. We're almost veterans doing this.
Almost.
Yeah, well, we're still, what are we, juniors?
I don't know. We're lames.
We're lames.
Lames. And juniors? You mean like if we were in high school?
Yeah, if we're in high school, we're juniors. We're upperclassmen now.
Yeah, but we're still getting beat up by all the freshmen.
Yes. And we hope to do a lot more. And also, I'm just going to keep hyping the 100th episode. And we really don't have any plans yet. But,
you really are.
But I'm just going to be like, wait for episode 100.
It's gonna be cray cray.
We'll just call it episode 100 cray cray.
Cray cray. All right. So thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Canary Cry Radio. Make sure to tune in next time. But until you do, think outside the cage.
The Bigfoot cage.